Deerfield Fantasy Football. I am your host at Hot BFF. I can't hear myself over the sound of the intro in my headphones. There we go. That's a lot better. No volume control this week as we are kind of separate. I am driving the episode. I am joined from the Great White North by @Nick Sparts. Nick, how are you? How was your Thanksgiving?
I'm doing all right. I'm trying to get over some technical difficulties here and some poor internet quality, but we're making it work okay. Hopefully we don't have any issues here today.
Yeah, my technical difficulties, I think, centered around me continuing to try to minimize your video, which apparently I'm not allowed to do. So it will freeze the OBS stream, so that's good. Maybe. Hold on. That might have worked. All right. Anyway, today we've got all your Week 12 previews for the Sunday night games, those that did not. So everything in Week 12, basically the Sunday night games. All your Week 12 previews for everything that didn't happen yesterday. I'm still feeling the effects of a food coma. I just woke up about an hour ago. Nick, I know, was rushing to get started, but we're going to do our best to fumble through this for you. Before we get started, though, let's preview a beer. Oh, and as always, shows on YouTube if you're listening to the audio stream. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, around 5:45 p.m. You can follow the show at Beerfield FF on Twitter, Beerfield Fantasy Football, I believe, on Instagram, Untapped. Is that right? I don't know.
Beerfield FF.
Okay, I don't normally do this part, so I'm struggling here. All right, and that's Beerfield FF, though, Untapped, Instagram, Facebook, MySpace, Tumblr.
Yep.
Wherever else.
Our Tumblr is lit. Check it out.
GeoCities coming soon. All right, let's preview a beer as soon as I get to the top of the notes to find the beer preview notes. There we go. Beer fuel. All right, and on today's episode, we have Dark Matter by Logboat Brewing Company. Logboat is based out of Columbia, Missouri, so west of St. Louis. It's their first time on the show. It's 6.6% wheat porter with hints of dark chocolate and roasted coffee. I don't know that I've ever had anything that claims to be a wheat porter before. Hi, Nick's brother.
Yep, that's my younger brother Ted guest spotting on the pod here.
Awesome. A little bit of nudity there for the folks. A little nudity. All right, let's kick into the news on that note. News. And just one element of news. It's a sad one. I actually didn't see this, but Texans owner Bob McNair passed away.
Yeah, he was suffering from skin cancer for the last couple months and had toned his duties down. I know he's one of the more controversial owners in the league. He'd had some weird interactions with some of his players, but he was a major figure in the NFL, and seeing him pass away is always a sad thing to see any sort of major change like that in the NFL. We've had a lot of owners die in the last couple of years. Yeah, we have, and unfortunately none of them are Stan Kroenke. Not that I mean to wish that on anybody, but Bob McNair definitely did have some little bit of back and forth. It's like for everything you did that was like, okay, he's not a bad guy, another two things would come out that really were eyebrow raising. So still always sad when something like this happens, especially this close to the holidays. So thoughts with him and his family, and hopefully the Texans get a win for him. Let's get into what the hell happened now.
What the hell happened?
All right, 3 games on yesterday's slate during your Thanksgiving holiday. I got to actually watch about 1 3/4 of one. But the one I got to watch is the one I cared about. Oh, wait, we got Monday first, don't we? We haven't recorded.
Monday night first, man.
Wow, we have not recorded since Monday. I forgot about that. All right. It's not like it's on the notes in front of me or anything either. Starting with Monday first, though, before we get to the Turkey Day games, and what is probably the game of the year, century, lifetime, if you like offense anyway. Rams 54, Chiefs 51, in a game that lived up to the hype. So often you see these and they don't live up. But everyone did things in this except for Sammy Watkins. So
Yeah, Sammy saw, I think, 5 snaps.
Yeah, he was not 100%. Starting with the Chiefs, though, Patrick Mahomes, 33 of 46 for 478 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So enough interceptions to negate one of those touchdowns in 6-point TD leagues and plus and non. But ultimately, still a very, very good day for him in an all-out slugfest. Just a quick note on the interceptions. One of those was the last drive of the game. He tried to force it downfield, and Joyner picked it off. The one before that Marcus Peters got, his arm was hit by a pass rusher, which threw the throw off just enough to be kind of short and behind Conley.
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure on him, especially late in the game when they were trying to do drives and they were in obvious passing mode. But overall, he got just 6 touchdowns. Even if he threw 3 picks, you're not caring about it.
Nope, you don't. Kareem Hunt, in a game that was kind of meh for running backs because of the amount that these teams had to force the ball downfield, still managed to give you a solid day because of his involvement in the passing game. He had 41 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown on 3 receptions, 14 per 70 on the ground. It just shows that fear about Hunt early on in the season was really overblown. He's pretty matchup proof, or game script proof anyway.
Yeah, he's involved enough in the offense where you're not worried about him overall. He's just going to be a guy you roll out most weeks.
Yep. As for the wide receivers, Tyreek Hill saw 14 targets, snagging 10 for 215 yards and 2 touchdowns, including, I believe, a couple bombs. So he had the blow-up game I think you expected from him in this one. Conley filled in very, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for here. Help me out.
Exceptionally? Did a good job?
Yeah, exceptionally.
Hats off to Conley.
Adequately, that's what it was. For Sammy Watkins, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 74 yards, and 2 touchdowns in relief of Sammy Watkins, who was still hobbled by his injuries. He had just 1 reception for 4 yards in this one. Probably needed another week.
I think this was Conley's best game of his career, actually.
I think it was, too. And then Travis Kelce did exactly what you expect from him in this one also. 15 targets, caught 10, 127, and a touchdown. So you'll take that from a tight end any week. And honestly, in a game to where neither defense should have been good, the Chiefs' defense actually stepped up and gave you a startable day somehow. In a game where the Rams put up 51, they still were able to force 2 fumbles, 5 sacks, and they picked up a touchdown.
Yeah, both defense ended up in the top 5 defenses for scoring that week because of defensive touchdowns.
Yep. So, in what should have been negative performances, both of them turned in, which made it an even better game. People were saying, oh, there's no defense in that one. Oh, there was big play defense in that one, that's for sure.
And that matters more for fantasy than actual defense.
It sure does. On to the Rams. Jared Goff was the stellar of the 2 quarterbacks in this one. He didn't really have to be. 31 of 49, 4 touchdowns, no picks, 2 fumbles lost, and took 5 sacks. Pressure got to him, but in the end, he had 1 fewer mistake than Mahomes, which allowed the Rams to prevail. Also, a rare rushing touchdown for Jared Goff, so don't get used to that. As for Todd Gurley, a little disappointing in this one because they had to force the ball downfield, and I believe he was dealing with an ankle, I think.
Yeah, he tweaked an ankle and was limited for the rest of the game, so they were trying to not use him as much as they would normally.
Yeah, just 94 total yards in this one. Then again, the name of the game was just get the ball downfield. Brandon Cooks gave you his normal day, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 107 yards, no touchdowns. That's about what's been his ceiling this year. The touchdowns for Cooks have been pretty down.
Yeah, they haven't been able to get him free on a release like we've seen Hill do all season. I'm not sure why their offense hasn't been able to flip that switch. But Cooks has been more of a floor guy most of the year, which is odd for Cooks.
Yeah, you got more of your standard Rams performances out of your normal guys in this one. Gurley actually had a down week. Goff had an up week. But for the wide receivers, it was about what you expected. Robert Woods also did about what you've come to expect from him. 6 receptions on 8 targets for 80 and a touchdown. And just replace Cooper Kupp with Josh Reynolds because his stat line was very Cooper Kupp-like. 8 targets, 6 receptions. Did I type those wrong?
You might have. I think Reynolds actually had more yards than Woods did, so I think he was closer to 90.
Let me vet this real quick. I've got it pulled up still. Hold on. Week 11. I think I typed the same stat line for both players, which is a glaring rookie mistake. I was rushing through this. He did. Woods was 4 of 11 for 72 and a touchdown. So again, kind of a Robert Woods like stat line, not exactly what you'd expect from him. Josh Reynolds had the Cooper Cup-like line of 8 targets, 6 receptions, 80, and a touchdown. So, again, correcting that earlier stat, Woods had 11 targets, 4 receptions, 72, and a touchdown. Again, what you'd expect from these receivers, though. Just replace Cooper Cup with Josh Reynolds.
Goff had a few passes, too, where he just straight up missed Woods. Woods could have had a bigger day if Goff had been on target.
Yeah, I'd assume that only 4 receptions on 11 targets was not Robert Woods' fault most of the time. Where you really got your performance boost in this one, though, from the game script was Higbee and Everett. Both got involved in this one. Higbee caught 6 of his 7 targets for 63. Everett was just 3, caught just 3, but 49 yards and 2 touchdowns. So a rare Rams tight end sighting for fantasy relevance. I'm not chasing those points, but I think both are worth keeping an eye on at least this week, because if the target volume's there, you're going to go grab one of them.
And by this week, we mean week 13 because they're on bye this week.
Yeah, next week. So it could be, if you need tight end help, though, a preemptive grab, especially if Higbee, who had the more target volume, might not be the worst decision that you could make.
Yeah, he was involved, too, in some screens and things where it's high percentage plays. Definitely something to keep an eye on. I'm not sure if it was just a scheme against the Kansas City Chiefs or in general. They're going to try to use him more.
Yep. And then, as with the Chiefs defense, the Rams defense had 3 picks, also a touchdown, so they managed to be relevant as well in a game where they gave up 51.
They actually had 2 touchdowns, a fumble and an interception.
That's what it was.
They were the defense won last week.
Somehow, in a game where you give up 51 points, you are the defense won.
Yep, it just shows to go that fantasy scoring does not reflect real-life defense very well.
We say it all the time. You can have good defenses that aren't big play defenses that are shit for fantasy, and you can have defenses that are big play defenses that give up a ton and are good for fantasy. That's it for Monday night's game, though. It'll be a long time before we see another one like that. You could only hope for a rematch in the Super Bowl, which, given the fact that my team will probably be in the playoffs, I'm not hoping for that. But as a fan, I'd kind of want to see it again.
All right.
On to the Falcons and the Saints. Nick had this one. The Saints steamrolled the Falcons 31-17 in a game that left a lot of people frustrated and me just amused.
All right. Well, before we get to that, we do have a quick question from Austin. He says, I've got Baldwin and Gordon in a PPR league. What do you think the odds are each of them suiting up and doing well this week, for his first part of the question?
Well, as far as suiting up, that's the part I'm a little bit concerned about. You've got Melvin Gordon, whose hamstring issues pop back up. He's been limited. So even if he does play, I'm not sure they lean on him as heavy. Doug Baldwin, I like his prospects to go a bit less than Gordon's, though.
You like him less?
Baldwin? I think that his chances to play are less than Gordon's.
Okay. I actually had the opposite feeling. I thought Gordon was less likely since he re-injured a hamstring.
Well, Baldwin re-injured a groin, so the difference being, though, that Baldwin didn't practice all week, and Gordon's at least been practicing limitedly.
Okay. Yeah. If I was putting money on it, I think the most likely scenario is neither one goes. He says he has Jalen Richard, Alshon Jeffrey, Corey Davis, and Matt Breida available. I think if I was sitting in those shoes, I'd be rolling out Jeffrey and Breida this week.
I would too. They're both going to be safer. Like I said, even if Gordon plays, they shouldn't have to lean on him too heavy. And I think once they get a lead, you're going to see a lot more Austin Eckler in that one. So I'm with you, Nick. I would be leading Breida and Jeffrey there.
All right, and even if they go, I may still lean that way just out of caution.
Mm-hmm.
And he also says in a different league, he says if AJ Green doesn't go, who does he pick out of DJ Moore, Evan Ingram, or Chris Carson?
Well, AJ Green is not expected to go. Man, I don't like Carson a whole lot. Evan Ingram
against the Eagles.
Yeah, which isn't a fantastic tight end matchup, but he does get volume.
And then DJ Moore has the Seahawks,
who have been decent against outside receivers.
But DJ Moore's a slot receiver.
That's true. I'm going DJ Moore.
I agree with you, DJ Moore. And then Pavan also snuck in with a question here right before I was about to transition out. I think he already asked this, but I think he's looking for a second take. Winston or Rivers this week? I was Team Rivers last time. I think you were Team Winston.
I am still Team Winston. I had both of those games and deep dove the numbers even more because when I answered last week, I was more Jamison Rivers, but I had really only looked at Winston's matchup heavily. I got to look at both matchups heavily today, and I'm even more firmly in the Winston court.
All right, so he's still going Winston, and Dan was also Team Winston last time when you asked that question. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to Falcons Saints here, where as mentioned, Falcons come up short, losing 17-31 on the road. Falcons had a ton of opportunities in this one. They kept literally fumbling the ball away. Matt Ryan gets you 377 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick, but there was multiple situations where they were in the red zone and they managed to screw it up. Matt Ryan had a fumble. Calvin Ridley had a fumble going into the end zone, so this could have been a much bigger day for Matt Ryan. His schedule down the stretch is awesome, though, so continue rolling him out there. He should be fine, and he still gave you a 20-point game in this one, so you're okay with it. Running game did bullshit. 26 total yards for the entire offense, and 16 of those yards were from Matt Ryan. Tevin Coleman managed to save his day with a receiving touchdown, finishing 3 of 17 and a touchdown through the air, but he had 8 for 6 yards on the ground, which is less than ideal for a running back. Rest of the running game did nothing. Ito Smith was 4 carries, 0 yards. At the receiving game, it was pretty much all Julio, Ridley, and Sanu. All finished with 70-plus yards. Julio's up at 147. Ridley got you the lone touchdown. Target breakdown was 14 for Julio, 13 for Calvin, 4 for Sanu. Austin Hooper gave you his floor day, which he does do from time to time. He caught 5 for 31. So you're hoping for better days out of him going forward, but occasionally he is going to give you one of these days. Just a reminder, he is more of a back-end tight end one than a mid to high tight end one.
Yep, that is Austin Hooper in a nutshell pretty much, but 5 for 31 floor is about what most tight ends floor days are anyway. It's a good day for half the tight ends in the league.
Yep, I'll still take it over what the hell Kyle Rudolph's been doing as of late.
I will too, and that Saints defense has really stepped up over the last few weeks. The Falcons could move the ball but not score, and as long as your defense is doing that, that's still a pretty rough matchup. Granted, Sarkisian in the red zone is still a dumpster fire.
Yeah, the defense has gotten significantly more opportunistic over the last couple of weeks and creating a lot more turnovers.
Eli Apple needed a change of scenery too because he has been relatively decent since coming to New Orleans.
Yeah, he's still not amazing, but he's gone from a dumpster fire corner to a mid-tier corner.
Which is fine for your number 2 option.
All right, on to the New Orleans side, where Drew Brees only had to throw the ball 22 times, only gave you 171 yards, but gave you 4 touchdowns. So if you're in 6-point passing touchdown league, you're ecstatic, and 4-point, you're at least doing okay.
My favorite part about those touchdowns is where they went.
Yeah, it's none of the usual suspects. Kamara, Ingram, or Michael Thomas didn't score. Traquan Smith was inactive. So the touchdowns went to Tommy Lee Lewis, Dan Arnold, Austin Carr, and Keith Kirkwood.
For the second straight week, I've had to emergency start Austin Carr. For the second straight week, I've gotten 1 Austin Carr reception for a touchdown.
You'll take it in those situations.
I will absolutely take it. Dan Arnold's interesting, though, as an undrafted free agent. Have you seen the metrics on him?
Well, he's a converted wide receiver. His metrics look interesting, and I think in dynasty leagues or any sort of tight end premium leagues, he is a priority pickup immediately.
Yeah, he's a stash for sure in dynasty.
Because Ben Watson is not long for the NFL, and I've never really been overly impressed with Josh Hill. So Dan Arnold is definitely a name to know and could become a big piece of this offense. He looks like the most interesting tight end when you watch his tape on the field.
He does, and it's good to know that Tommy Lee Lewis is still a person.
Yep. NFL's best drummer scores a touchdown.
Yeah, I haven't heard from Tommy Lee all year.
So, yeah, Dan Arnold, Michael Thomas were your leading target getters with 6. They both caught 4. Just unfortunately, though, no one really did much of anything in this game. Mark Ingram finished with 52 rushing and 14 receiving yards. Alvin Kamara was at 89 rushing and 9 receiving. So those are okay metrics in half or full point PPR and standard. You're probably wanting more. And Michael Thomas only 38 yards. So people who were expecting a shootout in this one and what we expected as well, it didn't really come to be. So sorry for everyone who overstarted this matchup.
Nope, it sure didn't. And Reese just kind of made him pay. If you want to fade coverage to Thomas, fine. Let me throw touchdowns to everybody else.
Yep, and that's definitely what he did in this particular matchup. And that's all they had to do. They were ahead early, and it never really was that close.
Yep. Anything else in that game?
Outside of the defense overperforming, that's about it. Let's go ahead and kick it to your game that you had here was Bears-Lions.
Yeah, Bears-Lions. Bears beat the Lions 23-16 on your first Thanksgiving Day. A big game. A big come down from Rams Chiefs, but overall it wasn't necessarily what I would consider sloppy. It's just a different style. The defense has stepped up. You have the Bears using a backup quarterback, and the Lions without their top receiving options. Well, they had one of them, and their top running back. But anyway, starting with the Bears, Trubisky missed with a shoulder injury. Long term, don't worry too much about that. Nagy said if it was a Sunday game, he would have played, but they came off of a Sunday night game into a Thursday game. Not a lot of rest or recoup time. Chase Daniel filled in all right. Not that I think anybody started him, but he was 27 of 37 for 230 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He did overthrow 2 touchdowns, so he could have had an even bigger day as he just put one out of the reach of Tariq Cohen of note, but overall, about what you would like from your backup if you have to rely on him for a spot start.
Yeah, if you rolled him out in a 2-quarterback league, you're happy with it.
Yep. Tariq Cohen was the most productive back in this one, 59 total yards and a touchdown. As I previously mentioned, he was just overthrown on another touchdown. Howard continues to not be long for this scheme, it would appear. 7 attempts, just 13 yards in this one, as Taquan Mazzell got himself a touchdown and continues to take on a little bit larger role in this offense. I believe he had 5 touches.
Yeah, 5 touches, 3 targets.
It's the Benny Cunningham annoyance role.
At this point, if you own Howard in a dynasty league, you're praying he gets traded because it is not. As this offense has really come into form, he has become the guy who does not fit any longer.
No, and I was thinking about it today too. And as much as I like Tariq Cohen, also, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears can somehow spend a 3rd or 4th rounder on a back that is more of a dual threat Kareem Hunt type of back, a little bit bigger than Cohen, but with more shiftiness than Howard.
Yeah, at the very least, to be a more classic between the tackles, but also still enough of a weapon in the passing game or downfield that people have to cover him. I'm not sure there is one in this particular draft class.
I haven't watched
based on my initial scope, but it's something that probably will address in the next year or two. So you're hoping Howard gets traded this offseason if you're a Howard owner, but they may run through his contract and draft it back in the 2020 class as well.
Yep, so just something to be wary of if you're a dynasty owner. Maybe you're looking to move him as soon as that happens. And as far as potential fits in this year's draft class, this is a good time for a reminder to stay tuned all offseason. Back to the Bears, though. Taylor Gabriel was the leading target getter for wide receivers and really anybody. He had 8. He turned that into just 49 yards. Robinson had only 4 targets in this one, and what was a defensive struggle. I hate Trey Burton. He lost a fumble, which directly led to a Lions touchdowns. He whiffed on a few blocks, was just 4-7 for 28 yards and another dud performance. This is a guy who came in expected to have a big role, hasn't really carved out that big role in the passing game, and has been a liability as a blocker. And I mean, really watching him in this game just made me angry. It made me angry that they committed to him.
Yeah, they paid him a lot of money for him to come in and perform as he has, and he's not really developed. In fact, the last couple, probably 4-ish weeks, he's kind of been regressing.
Yep. The defense did come through in this one once again, though, to seal the game for the Bears. It was a late pick 6 by Eddie Jackson for his 5th defensive touchdown in just 2 years. That leads the league since 2012, and he was drafted in 2017.
Yep, and he scored more touchdowns than the majority of the wide receivers who were drafted in front of him in that draft class.
Yep. And a game-sealing interception by Kyle Fuller in the end zone. Another 2 sacks from this defense. So good to see Kyle Fuller can actually not drop a pick when it's thrown right to him. Looking at you, week 1. Looking at you. On to the Lions in this one. Stafford finished 28 of 38, 236, 2 picks, and a sad performance. They were able to move the ball some, but he just couldn't find the end zone. And when they got down there, it was a turnover fest for LeGarrette Blount. As for Blount, he's the first running back in recent memory to have a solid game against the Bears defense. Was their 3rd game in 12 days. I thought, having watched this team all season, that they looked a little bit tired, but he did go for 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. As long as 27 came on a missed tackle by one of the Bears' defensive backs. I believe it was Adrian Amos. Riddick caught his 7 targets for 48 yards to give you a solid PPR day. I'm not worried about necessarily, one, the Bears' defense against running backs because of the 3 games in 12 days, but 2, if Kerryon Johnson looks like he's going to miss more time, this is an endorsement that these two perform this well in this matchup, to where they may be emergency startable.
Yeah, especially if they got some easier matchups down the stretch. I think they still have the Cardinals in 2 weeks. They get the Bills in 3. So they have some matchups down the stretch that you may be able to emergency start them if Johnson's not back.
Yep. Kenny Galladay on this one caught a 43-yarder late in the game to kind of seal his solid day, 5 of 8 for 90 yards. Bruce Ellington saw 7 targets, but he caught just 6 for 28 yards in a Nelson Aguilar type of stat line.
All right. Anything else on that matchup?
No, that's it. The Lions' defense wasn't terrible, but they weren't spectacular either.
All right. Before we go to the last of the Thanksgiving games, Pavan wants to know, he is strolling out the Ravens defense this week. Should he do that, or should he switch to the Titans defense? I'm locking and loading the Ravens defense this week.
Yep, no, go roll the Ravens out. Ton of upside against the hapless Raiders.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a single defense I'd play over the Ravens this week. Even Chargers against the Cardinals, I think I'd still take the Ravens.
Yep.
All right. Redskins at the Cowboys. Cowboys win this one 31-23. These are Dan's notes, but I'll quick give you a summary of them. Bit of an ugly day for McCoy, 268, 2 passing touchdowns, 3 picks, 28 rushing yards. He may have some super flex or quarterback appeal, but he's been pretty ugly. Though, better than the rushing game. Peterson, 14 touches, just 44 total yards. Bibbs stole his goal line touchdown, finished 6 for 36 and a touchdown. So the running game has completely fallen off the wheels here as the offensive line has gotten banged up and they've lost Alex Smith.
Yeah, I think Trent Williams had to leave in this one too. So
yeah, he was already dealing with a thumb surgery recovery and he couldn't finish the game.
He said he was okay, but he left the stadium via ambulance. And Adrian Peterson actually got beat up in this one a while too. He ended up back in the locker room for a bit.
Yeah, his wrist got crunched on a block and he had to leave for a little bit. As Dan says here, Trey fucking Quinn didn't have a great game per performance, but he found the end zone 5, 26, and 1 on 6 targets. Josh Dawson was your leading receiver in terms of yards. He had 10 targets, caught 6 of 66. He may have some flex appeal if the trend continues. Maurice Harris didn't catch any of his 5 targets, so Dream is dead with him.
But yeah, Dawson is kind of solidifying himself as just an emergency Brandon LaFell type of receiver, I guess.
Yeah, he's the last kind of main. He's the last X standing, I guess, if you want to go by receiver formations.
Pretty much, yes. Trey Quinn is interesting, at least, given the fact that he's more of a safe option for Colt McCoy going forward.
Yeah, it was the tight ends though who gave you better production.
Exactly.
Reed was 6 of 75 on 8 targets, and it looks like he and Doxson are going to be the main targets along with Trey Quinn. Davis had a 53-yard touchdown to make him fantasy relevant. He had 4 targets, caught 2 for 73 and 1. Davis is always a big play guy, so if you ever need a YOLO start him, it's not a terrible idea. Defense wasn't great. Get 4 sacks, 0 turnovers, and allowed 31 points. I know I started him in a few places. It was not pretty.
Yep.
And to finish us up with the Cowboys, Dak gave you a 3-touchdown day. It was a solid overall performance for him. The Redskins' pass defense is starting to go the wrong way here. They were picking on Josh Norman all night. 289 total passing yards, gave you a rushing touchdown and 2 passing touchdowns. 3 straight games with a rushing touchdown, 5 in his last 6. He gets the Saints, Eagles, at Indianapolis to finish. You may be able to start him down the stretch here.
Yeah, but it'll depend on the only game that I'm seeing there that even maybe you temper expectations a bit is the Colts, and that's going to depend on what they do in the next 2 weeks leading up to that, how I'm going to project that one. And
Saints a little bit as well, too. Saints' defense has gotten better. Philly's the best of the 3.
That's true. Philly is the best of the 3, so I don't know if he's quite set and forget, but I think he's at worst a high-end streamer in those 2 bad matchups and an absolute start against Philadelphia.
Yeah, trade for Cooper has really helped Dak out. He's gotten so much better since that happened.
He has. It's worked out great on both fronts, and John Gruden looks like a fool again.
Yep, and for the offense, in terms of the Redskins' rush defense being elite, it has turned the wrong way the last couple weeks, and Zeke proved it again here. 31 touches, 143 yards, and a touchdown, 4 total touchdowns in his last 3 games. He's also averaging nearly 7 targets and 6 receptions a game since Cooper's trade. He's basically turned into the second wide receiver on this team. The only thing that's keeping him from a top 3 conversation is he only scores about 1 touchdown a game as opposed to 2+ like a lot of the other guys do.
Yeah, I mean, Zeke is still finally turning the corner. Like you mentioned, the Cooper trades helped him out a lot, I think. And the Redskins' run defense is just, I think it's a regression to the norm because I thought they were overperforming coming into this bad 3-week stretch. So this is just the universe's way of correcting itself.
And then Cooper had his breakout game against for the Cowboys here against the Redskins. 8 catches, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns on 9 targets. Unfortunately, I ran into him in about 4 spots this week, so this one really hurt.
Gets over the 8 target mark, he performs. It's a tried and true theory.
Yep, he's firmly back to being a wide receiver too. Basically, there's no other receiver here worth even considering. Gallup got you 6 targets, but caught 2 for 19 yards. Beasley was at 2 targets. It's basically Dak, Zeke, Cooper, maybe the defense, and maybe Brett Maher you're considering for starting week to week.
Well, and that's the same formula it was when Dez was there also. It was Dak, Dez, and Zeke, and nobody else.
That's about it. And the only real difference now is the defense is better than it was back then.
Yeah, but that's the problem with Dak, even though for fantasy he's fine as far as a quarterback goes. He really doesn't support multiple pass catching options. It's partially Dak, and it's partially just how good Zeke is.
And it's also the scheme seems to really focus on one receiver too.
Exactly.
Defense gave you 3 turnovers, 3 sacks, 23 points allowed for a very, very solid finish. They have some nice matchups. Actually, I should say the next 3 weeks suck, but I believe they have one nice matchup in week 16. I forget who they're playing, but I remember it being one I liked.
Yep.
All right, we spent enough time recapping games here. Hopper, why don't you kick us over to In and Out?
We're going to wrap that into the weekly previews because that's kind of a preview, and I didn't map that drop.
Okay.
Weekly preview.
A lot of these to go through. We had a couple quiet injury weeks, not so much in this one, though. So we're going to start with the ins. Marcus Mariota with his neck is expected to play. He got in a full practice, so it looks like it was just a stinger.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Allen with his elbow is expected to go. He's been practicing in full all week, so I don't know who that helps or how much that helps, but it's Josh Allen.
It's better than Nathan Peterman. I don't know if it's an improvement over Barkley, though.
I don't know either. And if he struggles, they might go back to Barkley. We'll see. Ryan Tannehill, he might get Kaisered, is what I'm saying.
Yep.
And then Ryan Tannehill is expected to start after his knee issues. So that's going to be a bump for the Dolphins in general, I would think.
Maybe. He wasn't doing much before he got hurt.
Better than Osweiler. Onto the running backs. Doug Martin was removed from the injury report. He is a full go, but a tough matchup against the Ravens this week. Jalen Richard still has relevance even with Martin going because of his passing involvement. As for the wide receivers, because I don't know that there's any other running back that is for sure playing that's hurt. Adam Thielen with a back and a calf issue practiced Friday. He is expected to go. And then Jimmy Graham is on at tight end. Is on track to play with a thumb injury. He has his thumb in a splint, but he was catching passes, so he's a go. And Gronkowski is expected to play for the first time in 27 days. Anything on either of those guys?
No, I don't love either one this week just due to the injuries they're dealing with, but they're both startable tight ends.
Yep. As for the guys that aren't playing, Joe Flacco with the hip injury, what's the viability of Lamar Jackson this week? I like him more than last week.
I think they'll probably run him 20-plus times again, and he'll probably give you a decent floor day at worst. I think it's more than likely he finally throws a touchdown, though.
You start him in 1 QB?
Fringe. He'd kind of be in the same range as like Nick Mullins for me.
Okay. Nothing to report on running backs that for sure aren't playing. Wide receivers, Pierre Garçon's going to miss again with the knee. That makes Marquise Goodwin an absolute must start, and OJ Howard to IR just because we haven't had an episode since Monday. I wanted to put this in there. So if Cameron Brate's still there, get him and start him.
Yep, and also for the Pierre Garçon injury, it makes Kendrick Bourne interesting.
Yes, it does. More on that when we get to the actual Niners game. And then for check back Sunday, Tom Brady did not practice on Friday. He has a knee injury, and then an illness was added to that. He is expected to go, however. Melvin.
One more note on the outs too. I forgot. Sam Darnold's been ruled out.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, I remember that from a couple days ago. I didn't scroll down far enough for it though. Yes, Darnold is not playing, so it'll be Josh McCown against the Patriots, which Jets usually, for whatever reason, do play better against the Patriots. I don't love it, but I'm going to start him in a 2QB. All right. Anyway, Tom Brady, knee illness. He's expected to play, even though he did not practice on Friday. I'm assuming he just didn't practice Friday because of the illness, not the knee. Melvin Gordon with a hamstring. We touched on him earlier. He is limited. I think even if he does play, that he's protected. I expect the Chargers to be up in that one early and to hold it. So temper expectations there if he does go. Alex Collins with the foot. He's a game-time decision, but Gus Edwards is really what you're looking at in that one.
Yep, it's the Gus bus this week.
Yep. Alex Collins not playing would just make that a much more firm yes, start him.
Mm-hmm.
As for the wide receivers, A.J. Green with the toe is expected out. He's officially game time, but he's not expected to play. So Tyler Boyd will be the wide receiver 1 once again. Doug Baldwin with the groin has not practiced all week. He is a trek back Sunday officially, but I don't expect him to go. Randall Cobb was limited, so he may suit up, but he's still behind MVS and Devontae Adams. And then Jordy Nelson was limited all week. Anything on those guys? Tyrell Williams also limited.
Wasn't going to start Jordy Nelson anyway. Cobb is also in a not start. Baldwin's the only one I'm even thinking of rolling out there. If he goes, I'll probably have to start him, but I'm not excited about it.
Yep. And then no checkbacks on tight ends, so they're relatively healthy. And that's all I've got for injury news. Again, check back Sunday morning for the 10:30 a.m. live stream where you have your latest injury updates, get you the inactives as they start to roll in, and tie a bow on some of these situations.
Yep, Dan Hopper will be there. I don't know where I'll be recording from yet because some weather may be changing my location, but I'll either be in Springfield or Minneapolis for that.
It'll be somewhere. All right. If you don't got anything else, let's go ahead and get a preview. Get to the previews for Sunday's games.
Let's run through this.
All right, let's go quick. Giants, Eagles. Eagles are favored by 6. It's a 46-point over-under. That is Hopper. I'm him. So for the Giants, Eli Manning, the Eagles' defense has had no picks over the last 4 weeks. They've given up 20 or more points in that time frame to opposing quarterbacks. He's very, very streamable to me. They're down their top 5 defensive backs. They're using wide receivers as corners in practice.
Yep, they're in bad shape on the secondary.
Yep. Saquon Barkley's a start your studs. The Eagles over on the season have been decent, but they've given up 35.8 points to the position on average over the last 3 weeks, including 22-plus over the last 5. As Zeke put up 30 and Ingram put up 22 looking at their last 2 matchups. So I think Barkley's going to be fine in this one. Slightly above floor, probably not a blow-up, though.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, they are down their top 5 defensive backs. Obviously, you're starting Odell Beckham, but I don't hate Sterling Shepard this week either. He's seen just 5 targets over the last 2 weeks, but it's an obvious weakness, and I think that the Giants try to exploit that because of how thin Philadelphia is. And the other option there would be Evan Ingram, but Philadelphia has been very good against the tight end. They also haven't had more than 5 targets go to the position since week 3, though. Only 2 tight ends have been over 5 points all season. Ingram does get target volume typically, but I think this is more of a Sterling Shepard game than an Evan Ingram game.
Yeah, I think you're right. The only saving grace he might have is that he does run out of the slot more than in line, which may get him some matchups that help, but it's still a risky play.
Yep. And then I'm not in love with the defense on the road here, or ever, unless they're playing the Bucs. On to the Eagles. Carson Wentz, 7 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions at home this season, over 300 yards in 3 of his 4 home starts. This Giants team made Nick Mullins look better than Alex Smith and Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick combined for nearly 35 points. You're going to go ahead and start Carson Wentz. There's no questioning that. As for the running backs, Josh Adams has been the guy here, and I love him this week. Matt Breida, Adrian Peterson, and Peyton Barber have all gotten over 100 yards and a touchdown against the Eagles, whose run defense is also suffering. You're going to stay away from Smallwood, though, as Philadelphia is allowing just 33.3 yards to backs. But Josh Adams is a fine flex start this week.
I don't know what Philly's defense has to do with Smallwood, but okay.
Oh, Giants is what I meant, but you get it. I was rushing through these. Giants defense, the stats right, the note was wrong. Last week was a 6 week. The Giants had allowed 2 wide receivers to go into double digits. So Alshon Jeffrey, I like. Golden Tate's the other one I like. As slot receivers tend to be feasting there. Aguilar could be if you're confident he gets enough work. There was a report earlier this week that Golden Tate is struggling to fit into the offense, but I'm taking Tate over Aguilar in this one.
He's got more of a track record. All we saw from Aguilar was really last year and a little bit of this year, whereas Tate's been a productive wide receiver for almost 5 years now.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and say that Golden Tate's a fine start. I have confidence in that this week. And then Alshon Jeffrey, I love. And then Zach Ertz, you're going to start your studs. You're not sitting him with a state of tight ends ever.
Agreed.
That's all I got on that game. The Eagles' defense, as I mentioned, I don't necessarily love them because the secondary is in shambles.
Yeah, if you're starting their defense, you're hoping for a lot of sacks.
Yep, and I don't necessarily know that that's going to happen either because their sack numbers have gone down because they can't cover long enough for the pass rush to get home.
All right.
On to Nick. He's got the Browns and the Bengals. The Bengals are favored by 3 in this one. It's a 47.5 point over-under. 3-point favorites just because the Bengals are at home. Nick, what do you got?
All right. Mayfield almost was my start of the week over Nick Mullins with how bad the Bengals have been against opposing quarterbacks. He's a solid streaming option if you're missing Mahomes or Goff due to the bye week. Bengals have allowed 2+ QB touchdowns to 7 of 10 teams. They're currently last in points allowed to opposing quarterbacks, averaging 306 passing yards and 2.4 touchdowns a game. Absolutely love Mayfield this week. He's going to be a solid streaming candidate for you. Bengals also match up with their worst quarterback in the league, but their worst running back performance in the league. Over the last 4 games, they've allowed 201 total yards to opposing backfields and 9 touchdowns in just 4 games. Chubb was Hopper's start of the week. He's a top 8 play this week. Duke Johnson's also an RB2. He's seen back-to-back games with 7+ touches and scored touchdowns in both games, and this is tied for his easy matchup during the fantasy season. He sees the Bengals again at home in Week 16 for those of you eyeing the fantasy championship. There's a strength to the Bengals defense. It's wide receiver. They're only 10th worst against the position.
That's their strength.
Top-end wide receivers have produced against them. Middling wide receivers have been more touchdown reliant. So Landry's a mid-wide receiver too. He's been inconsistent, only scored twice on the entire season in only 3 games with 90+ total yards. He's had the lowest catch rate of his career by 13%, 53 so far in 2018. His previous low was 66% in 2015. And Callaway and Higgins, I don't trust enough to against this matchup, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of them did haul in a touchdown, but it's too much of a reach for me to risk starting one of the two.
Yeah, I agree with that. Landry's the only one I'm really even remotely comfortable with, and even then, I'm kind of eh.
Yep, he's been so inconsistent this year. It's been very painful. I hope this offense can take a step when they get a new coach and coordinator in next year.
Yep.
For the tight end position, they're 5th worst against tight ends, 68 yards a game, 5 total touchdowns in 10 games to the position. My issue, though, is Njoku's only had 6 targets in the Browns' last 3 games. In the 3 games before that, he had 29. But since they made the OC change, it's really plummeted his usage. He's a low-end tight end 1, even in a really, really nice matchup. So it's just a really tough place to trust Njoku with in the last couple of games.
Yeah, you broke up really bad there at the end of that, but just to put a bow on what Nick was saying, it's a really bad matchup for Njoku. He's a low-end tight end 1.
All right, and then just to put a bow on the defense here, Bengals have been solid at protecting the ball, limiting sacks, scoring a decent number of points. Browns are averaging 2+ sacks and turnovers a game, though. So if you're looking for a really high-floor streaming option, they should sack Dalton at least a couple times and cause a turnover or 2 to kind of save your day if you're looking for 5 points.
I am streaming them this week, at least 1 plus.
On the Bengals side, Browns have allowed 4 straight quarterbacks to throw for 250+ yards. 3 of them hit 330 yards, and 3 of the 4 had 2+ touchdowns. So Dalton is also a solid streaming option, probably in that 12 to 15 quarterback range. I'd prefer Mayfield if A.J. Green is out, though. If Green plays, then Dalton is a low QB1. So it sounds like he is not going to go.
Yeah.
So for the Browns defense, they're kind of in a tale of 2 defenses here, depending on the quality of the opposing running back they faced. They faced Connor twice, Hunt, and Gordon for 4 of their matchups this season. Those guys have averaged 126 rushing yards, 48 receiving yards, and 2.5 touchdowns in their matchups against them. So if you think Mixon is on the same level as those 3 players, he is an absolute top 3 play this week. Backs not in the elite tier, significantly worse, though. 127 total yards in the other 6 games and 3 total touchdowns. Personally, I think it's probably going to split the middle. I've got Mixon as a back-end one this week.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think Mixon's pretty similar to Hunt in his skill set, but a little bit bigger like the other two backs are, that being Connor and
the offense
Gordon.
just isn't as good to support him.
Right. So I agree with you. I think it's a solid day for Mixon. I don't think you get up near what Connor and Gordon have done, but I think that you're better than what everybody else has done.
Yeah, I'd guess probably close to about 100 yards and a touchdown is what you're looking at for him this week.
Yep, and you'll take that.
Number one wide receivers have absolutely torched the Browns this year. They're averaging 85 yards a game, and 7 of the 10 touchdowns they've allowed have been to wide receiver ones on the opposing team this season. So if Green is out, he's a high wide receiver 2 with a nice ceiling. If Green is healthy, he'll be a back-end wide receiver 1. Boyd drops down to the low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3 in this matchup. So target the wide receiver 1 this week.
Yep.
I think it's probably going to be Boyd, though, with Green missing.
Agreed.
Browns defense was actually amazing against tight ends until they ran into Kelsey and Hooper the last 2 weeks. Uzama's not nearly on their level, but it is a plus matchup. His 4.4 targets, though, is the main concern. So he's more of a streamer than he is an absolute must-start tight end.
Yeah, unfortunately, with all the injuries at tight end, the target volume hasn't necessarily been going his way. And even with Green hurt, I thought that you would see more of it, but that hasn't necessarily panned out. So that's slightly disappointing.
Yeah, he seems to always get 4, maybe 5 targets every single week.
Yeah.
Defense is in the hell no category. Browns have gotten better as of late in limiting sacks. They've only had 4 in the last 3 games and 3 turnovers in the last 3 games. So there's no floor here for the Bengals. It's an absolute hell no category.
Yep.
All right. You're up next, Hopper, with 49ers against the Buccaneers.
All right, 49ers, Buccaneers. We'll start with the 49ers. Nick Mullins. He gets the Bucs, so he's a premium tier stream. Nick covered him as his start of the week, I believe, on Monday, way back when. He looked at least the part of a competent backup last week. Looked really solid in week 1, so he is his first start, so he is a very high tier streamer. Matt Breida is healthy, and he's been great when he is. Tampa Bay's bottom 3 against the run, so you're absolutely going to start him. Love Matt Breida as a high running back 2 or back-end running back 1 this week. Marquise Goodwin, you're starting him with no Garcon. Kendrick Bourne also, as you mentioned, is a very interesting play with no Garcon. They like him in the red zone. And again, the 49ers are playing the Bucs, who we know how terrible their defense is. That's why I'm not relying on this stat heavily, because we've pounded for 12 weeks now how terrible the Bucs defense are from a statistical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And then George Kittle, start your studs. There's no way you're sitting him. That's all I got on the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
Steering away from the defense. As for the Bucs, Jameis Winston was my start of the week. Quarterbacks are over 250 passing yards, 2 touchdowns every time they have to throw against San Francisco. Tampa Bay is averaging 41 attempts per game. Jameis Winston's Achilles heel is normally his interceptions, but San Francisco has just 10 of those all season. So if you go back to earlier in the show where it was the Winston Rivers touchdown, the difference is Winston has more upside. The upside in this game is actually pretty massive. As for Peyton Barber, San Francisco has been good as of late, giving up no more than 10 points to a back over the last 3 weeks, which includes David Johnson and Saquon Barkley. That being said, Barber has been at least solid and should be considered a mid-tier flex. He's been better when Jameis plays, and he's been solid the last several weeks, including in some, at least what looked like bad matchups. So I don't love him. It's not going to be nearly as good as it was last week, but you're still probably going to get 60 to 70 yards and a couple receptions out of him.
Mm-hmm.
As for your wide receivers, your top options against the 49ers consistently go into double digits and have gone over 15 points for the last 6 times out. So expect Evans to have a solid game. Second options haven't been great or really needed against San Francisco, so Godwin I'm a little bit more tepid on. Same with Jackson. At least with Godwin, though, you got a 50-50 shot of a touchdown, so he's in the emergency play level.
Mm-hmm.
And with no Jordan Howard, I love Cameron Brate. Brate plus Winston is a better love story than Twilight. And Tampa Bay uses their tight ends a boatload. So San Francisco's not exactly weak in that area, but if you target the tight end more than 5 times, they are consistently over 45 yards. Winston looks for Brate in the red zone as well, so I expect Cameron Brate to just be a week-to-week start here on out.
All right. Before we move on to Patriots against the Jets, we had a quick question from Jimmy. He wants to know if it's possible for Carson Wentz and Eric Ebron to put up 60.
Oof. Is it possible? Sure, anything's possible if you set your mind to it. But do I expect it? No, I don't.
Yeah, you need another 3 touchdown Ebron game.
Yeah, you, and I don't see the Dolphins playing the Colts close enough to have that happen.
Agreed.
So I would say 45 is probably more realistic.
I think that's even
on the
stretching it.
on the high end. More realistically, you're probably closer to 35 to 40.
Yeah.
High end of 45. 60 would just be, all right, I can see a world where that happens, but I got to try real hard to see it.
All right.
All right. Moving on. Patriots, Jets. Nick, you've got this one. Patriots favored by 9.5. It's a very low over-under at 46.
Yeah, on the Patriots side, if Brady goes, this is a get-right game for him with the Jets allowing 2+ touchdowns in 6 straight games. But Brady has been pretty rough this season. He's got multiple touchdowns just 4 times this season. He's thrown for 300 yards just 3 times. So he's kind of a back-end QB1, even in a really nice matchup. He's my QB9. Overall, I've been fading Brady in most weeks, and if you have him, you may be able to find a better option trying to stream. He just hasn't been the guy we've been looking for the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, he hasn't been. He hasn't bounced back this year like he did after slow starts the last few years. The Patriots have had a better running game. He hasn't necessarily needed to carry the team, but even when he has, that's kind of when they've lost or not looked great. So he's just been consistent, but he's not been otherworldly.
Yep. For the running game, Michelle's going to be back this week, so James White and him will be splitting the majority of the work. Before Michelle got hurt, he was seeing 24+ touches a game, and any running back that saw 20+ touches against the Jets, all but one scored. 3 of the 5 hit 100+ combo yards. So Michelle is a high-end RB2. The only concern at all is if they ease him into his workload, but I expect he'll see close to his normal slate of touches. For White, pass catching backs haven't done much against the Jets this year, only 426 total yards and 2 touchdowns receiving for running backs. But basically, teams haven't bothered throwing on them, whereas White's going to use him as a priority. So I still think he's going to be as a mid RB2 in this matchup. He's not seen lower than 7 targets in a game since week 4.
He's option 2 or 3 on this team, even with Gronk back. So he's a top 4 at worst.
Yeah, in terms of on the team, agreed.
In terms of on the team, exactly. So I'm fine with that. And as mentioned, it's in New York, and the Jets do tend to step up when they play the Patriots.
Mm-hmm. On to the receivers, where Gordon and Edelman have been target hogs as of late. They've gotten at minimum a floor of 6 targets and an average of 8.8 per game for Gordon and 9.4 for Edelman since week 6. Both are mid-wide receivers, 2s in a neutral matchup. Jets aren't really good or really bad against opposing wide receivers. They're mostly getting burned on the run, though, so teams don't have to throw at them too much. But expect some decent volume to go both their ways. The place that I want to highlight, though, is how Gronk has been just pretty mediocre this season. You may be able to sit him if you have a really good matchup with one of your other tight ends and who've been plugging in his place. He's averaging 64 yards a game on 4 catches, only 1 touchdown on the season, and he's not going to be 100% in this particular matchup. On top of that, the Jets are the number 3 defense against opposing tight ends, allowing 31 yards a game and just 3 touchdowns on the season with the position. Gronk is still a top 12 tight end, but he's not a must start this week.
No, I agree with that completely.
As for the defense, nice play against the turnover-prone Jets.
Yep, especially with Josh McCown going, who looked like absolute trash his last go-around.
Yep, I originally had Darnold listed here, but I'm just going to replace McCown. He was terrible when he came out before the bye week. I don't like him as a start. Even in 2 quarterback leagues, he's a fringe top 24 play at best. You're hoping for some garbage time yardage and a touchdown or 2 to save your day. Jets running backs are averaging just 118 yards a game over the last 4, only a single touchdown. If you're going to start either one here, I actually prefer McGuire, who's going to get more pass catching work. Crowell has been super touchdown dependent this entire season. So McGuire's more of a floor RB3 play, and Crowell is on my bench based on my rankings this week.
Yep.
Since they're in the 4 games they had before the bye week, not a single Jets wide receiver broke 70 yards or scored a touchdown. I'm benching all of them until we see some progress from anybody.
Yeah, that goes with the running backs too, honestly, for me anyway.
Yep. The only person I'm at all excited for besides possibly McGuire is Chris Herndon. He has been the most productive receiver on this team. He has either led them in receiving yards or scored a touchdown in 5 straight weeks. Go ahead and roll him out as a low end tight end one in a matchup where he'll probably get used in catch up mode.
Agreed.
That's all I got.
All right. Next up, we got the Jags and the Bills. Jags favored by only 3 in this one, somehow. It's a 37-point over-under. Dan, you got it. And by Dan, I mean me. All right, so Jaguars, 2 great plays this week per Dan. Leonard Fournette and the Jacksonville defense. Fournette's getting all the touches since the return in Week 10. He's averaging 29 touches, 26 carries, and 3.5 receptions. 3 touchdowns in that span and around 250 total yards. The yards after catch is bad, but the volume is elite, and you always play the defense against the Bills. Bortles and the patch-catching core are all sitting along with Hyde and Yeldon. Bills are actually fairly good against opposing passing offenses. They're the best against opposing quarterbacks, giving up just 12 points per game to quarterbacks. Oh, and they're the same against wide receivers. Sorry, that was a badly formed sentence. Giving up 17 points per game total to wide receivers this season. Hyde and Yeldon are a distant second, third to Fournette's heavy workload. So basically, to put all of that under a bow, you're not starting anybody other than Fournette in the defense in this one because the Bills are really good against quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
As for the Bills, moving on to them, sitting everybody minus the DST. McCoy's a volume play, but Dan does not trust him to produce even with those touches. You're praying his pass catching can make up for the lack of rushing yards. And with Josh Allen throwing the ball, his pass catching was also pretty in the tank also. While Dan likes what Zay Jones has done over recent weeks, again, Jacksonville's good against wide receivers, and he was doing that with Matt Barkley in, not necessarily Josh Allen. So you're going to have to see Josh Allen, these guys produce with Allen. It's kind of the bad part of a quarterback change. It takes an elite wide receiver you can do it to crack any type of points against the Jags secondary, and the Bills definitely do not have that. Hold on to Zay Jones, though, because better weeks are coming, or at least you hope if Allen has the same type of hungry eyes for him that Matt Barkley does.
All right. That all you got on that matchup?
That's all Dan has on that matchup.
Okay.
All right. Next up, we got Seahawks-Panthers. This is another Dan game, but because Dan's not here, Nick can take it. Panthers favored by 3.5. It's a 54.5 point over-under. Nick, what did Dan write about these guys?
Well, basically, Wilson has been very solid this year in the touchdown department. He's had multiple touchdowns in every game but one this season, but he's not been throwing for a lot of volume. He has not thrown over 300 yards once, only thrown over 250 yards once since week 1. Basically, you're hoping that he rushes a little bit and throws 3 touchdowns. Panthers are pretty poor against opposing quarterbacks this season, 7th most points allowed, along with 22 total touchdowns. So Wilson should be able to get you at least 2 TDs, maybe 3, to give you a decent day. He's a low QB1 this week. As long as Carson's healthy, he's a lock and loaded RB2. The Seahawks have been run more this year than any previous year. Carson is the main toter of the rock, averaging 4.5 yards per carry. Davis and Penny, on the other hand, eat into each other's work. Either one is very tough to trust. If Davis doesn't go this week, he is a little banged up. Penny would be a low-end flex play for you with the amount of touches Seattle's running backs tend to get.
Yeah, the big difference in the Seattle running backs is before Carson's injury, he was getting almost everything at about 30-plus per. And with Penny performing at least relatively well the last couple weeks, he's kind of demanded about 10 to 12 of that. So expect Carson in the 20 to 25 range. And then if Davis doesn't go, Penny in that 10 to 12 range.
Yep. For the receivers, if Baldwin can go, he's got a great matchup against Captain Munnerlyn. So they'll probably exploit that matchup heavily. So if Baldwin's in, he is definitely a must start as a mid wide receiver 2 this week. Lockett, if I like a lot. If Baldwin doesn't go, he'd be a wide receiver 2. If he doesn't go, he's more of a flex option for you. I'm not chasing David Moore. He's been a rough matchup for you the last couple of weeks.
Very touchdown dependent on Moore. Lockett will be the guy if there's no Baldwin.
Panthers continue to be the league's worst defense against opposing tight ends as well. So Nick Vannett, being the primary target getter for tight ends, is a solid streaming option for you. And even if you're in a super deep or 2 tight end type format, Ed Dixon is not a bad option for you.
Nope, and if Doug Baldwin doesn't play, I like Nick Vannett a lot more. He's pretty much a locked and loaded tight end one for me at that point.
All right, and then Seahawks defense is an okay, absolute emergency type play this week. Cam has taken a couple sacks the last couple weeks.
Yeah, and I think the Seahawks defense is another one that's kind of performed better than we thought they would. They're obviously not at the elite levels they had been in previous years, but they are middle of the road. So,
agreed. On to the Panthers side, where Cam has been an awesome play this season, very efficient, multiple touchdowns in every game since week 2. Seahawks are very good against opposing quarterbacks, giving up the third fewest points on the season, but basically you can't sit Cam at this point. He's a locked and loaded top 6 quarterback week in and week out. On a similar note, so is CMC. If there is a weakness to the Seahawks, it is running backs. And at this point, a floor day for CMC is 20 touches, 100 total yards, and a shot at a touchdown.
yeah, and whoops, I hit the switch. Out of your running back too, you're gonna take that every time. I was like, did I not get cord out? Nope, hit the on-off button.
All right, for the receivers, it looks like DJ Moore may have overtaken Devin Funchess. Matchup's not great, but DJ Moore is a nice upside play as a wide receiver 3 type flex type position, whereas Funchess is a mid-low one. He does see at least 7-8 targets every single day, every single game. Moore is starting to match that though and seems to be a much more efficient receiver. Samuel is more of a 16-team deep league type play though, because he does have a decent shot at making a big play for a touchdown.
Yep.
For the tight ends, Greg Olsen is a top 5 tight end. He scored touchdowns in 4 of his last 5 games. Targets is a bit of a concern, but he's getting work in the red zone enough that you're looking at him as a solid upside shot at getting a touchdown every single week. And that Wilson is generally safe enough with the football that you're not considering the Panthers defense. He'll take a couple sacks, but they're going to score enough points, not turn the ball over, that it's a really, really low floor for the Panthers. I would skip their defense.
Yeah,
that's all we got.
I'm in agreement with that completely.
Yep, that's all I got on that game. Let's go to Raiders versus Ravens to finish off the noon games.
All right, Ravens are favored by 10.5 with a backup quarterback, if that tells you anything in state about the Raiders. 43-point over-under. This is Dan's 3rd straight game, but I'll be reading these notes. So starting with the Raiders, we have one note here. Jared Cook may be the only decent play this week as the Ravens are still middle of the road against tight ends. And Cook might be the main target getter in Oakland now. The running game's a mess if Martin's hurt, plus the Ravens are good against running backs. Carr is never a start. I actually personally tweeted out yesterday that Austin Carr was the best Carr in fantasy football, and I stand by that firmly, so don't start Derek Carr. Mm-hmm. And the wide receivers are right there with him. Seth Roberts may get the most targets. Jordy Nelson if he plays, but it's just a terrible defensive matchup. So I'm not touching anything on the Raiders. I'd have Doug Martin, and I'm desperately trying to figure out how I don't play Doug Martin.
I think I've somehow managed to bench him everywhere, and I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, well, Carlos Hyde getting traded kind of screwed that for me. As for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson has decent floor, but very limited upside. He's a good play. He has in San Francisco written down, but I'm guessing that's Oakland. Oh, Superflex. SF is Superflex. Got it. Two quarterback leagues, but I still don't trust him in 1 quarterback leagues. San Francisco, Superflex, same thing. Gus Edwards looks to have taken over the running back 1 duties, at least for now, from Alex Collins, which automatically makes him a good running back 2 play this week, especially at the option between him and Jackson, looking really good last week, and it did. I think the threat of Jackson running really opened up lanes for Gus Edwards. Raiders have given up the most rushing yards per game this season, as the mark is at nearly 131. Collins is barely a flex play this week if he plays, but he has scored in the last 3 games, and if Gus struggles early on, Collins looks decent with his attempts, and that's what you worry about if Collins does play, is if Edwards can't get it going, they will go with the hot hand approach. So you could see more of a 50-50 split in that scenario. But either way, it sounds like Dan's leaning Edwards. I'm right there with him, and towards benching Collins. Buck Allen should be dropped at this point. He can't even sniff Pat's catching play anymore. He's just kind of not been used. With Lamar Jackson at quarterback, the passing offense is taking a huge step backwards. You fully expect Jackson to throw the ball more, and Oakland can't generate a pass rush for shit. So Jackson should have time to go through his reads and go for some... Jackson doesn't go through his reads. He reads once and runs. Anyway, Snead's Dan's favorite wide receiver start because he is the safe one, so he was getting targeted last week. Brown always has a chance for a big touchdown. I personally, commentating on Dan's nose, would not do that. Crabtree is the third wide receiver, so you're going to avoid him if you can. But just to kind of to sum that, Lamar Jackson going through his reads, I would just like to point out, is not a thing. Nick, do you agree with me on that?
No, he's pretty much a one read and go.
Yeah, it's a one read and go. So it's not really a time thing for Lamar Jackson or a being under pressure thing. It's a one read and go. And even then, he still has to be able to throw the ball to what he reads, which is why Willie Snead is the wide receiver play here. He's working underneath. He's working the safer routes. So that's who Jackson's going to throw to. Nick Boyle saw some early targets from Jackson last week. Matchup is decent, but Dan is still going to avoid the Baltimore tight ends because they are kind of a cluster. And the defense should be number one. That's maybe not number one in terms of points because of turnovers, but they're the number one streaming option this week easily.
Cool. Let's hit a beer review.
Yep, let's hit a beer review. That felt like a really long first part of this episode.
Beer review.
All right, Dan. Wait, you're not Dan. Nick, what did you think of Logboat Wheat Porter?
Dark matter.
Dark matter. It's a wheat porter.
Yep. I don't taste a ton of wheat. It's mostly just coffee, chocolate notes, so I'm not sure where the wheat really comes in. It tastes like a porter with some kind of lighter notes to it is probably the best way to describe it.
And I think that's where the wheat does come into it, honestly, as I think the wheat gives it an easier finish. I do get a little bit of that like you get on wheat beers, whereas with most porters, the roast kind of kicks in on the back end, or the dark chocolate bitterness and the coffee type bitterness. But I think with this one, what the wheat does for it is it takes away that bitterness at the back and it just levels it out. So you don't get a lot of the sweetness that you get from wheat. What it really does is it balances it more than I think most just porters are.
Yeah, basically, if you're describing it like how it tastes, instead of having kind of a downfeel where you get kind of into a bitter roast dark taste, it kind of finishes up into a little more of a brighter taste, but there's nothing that's distinctly wheat flavor out of it.
Exactly. You don't get any of the citrus that you would normally expect from a wheat ale or the incredibly sweet notes. It just balances out that dark chocolate and coffee up front very well.
All right.
Makes for a smoother drinking porter. So that's all I got. Thank you, Logboat, for coming out of the show. As with most beer companies, not like you had a choice, but with you guys distributing heavily down here in St. Louis, we'll be sure to get you on more. I see you guys a ton, so this was a solid first appearance. Moving on to the late games. Dolphins versus the Colts. Colts favored by 8 in this one. 51-point over-under. I'm not sure how this is a 3 o'clock game, but Nick, you got it.
Yeah, it got shifted to a 3 o'clock for some reason. I was a little surprised. For the Dolphins side, we're going to run through this real quick because there's very few starts here. Tannehill, before he got hurt, was averaging just 194 yards, 1.6 touchdowns, and 1 pick a game before a shoulder injury. He's now missing multiple weapons that have gone to IR due to injuries, so I want nothing to do with Tannehill against a better-than-expected Colts defense. Where I am trying to get some starts is Frank Gore, who's had 10-plus touches in 5 straight games. He had a 20-touchdown performance in Week 10 before their bye week. So the Colts are only at 3.9 yards a carry, 57 receiving yards per game, and 6 touchdowns on the season. Gore, with his volume, is an RB3 play here for you. Drake is more of a boom-bust RB3. You're really hoping for a touchdown with him. And as of late, it's been more bust than boom. So I try to avoid Drake if at all possible. Out of the receiving game, the only person I want anything to do with is Danny Amendola, who's a floor wide receiver 3, mostly based on target volume. He's getting 7+ targets in 4 straight games. Gives you kind of a nice floor. Parker and Stills are both on the bench. Outside of a weird 100-yard game for Parker, neither has broken 50 yards or over the last 5 games, and Stills has 1 single 5-yard touchdown. No tight end worth consideration from the Dolphins side. I want fuck all to do with their defense. On the Colts side, Luck throws 3 touchdowns a game in 7 straight now. You basically can't sit him. So while Miami is above average matchup against opposing quarterbacks, I would generally still roll out Luck because I think his floor for you is going to be 2 touchdowns and 200 yards. Mid-quarterback one like usual, and I think he has a decent shot to keep getting this streak to 8 straight games with 3 touchdowns.
Agreed.
Real weakness of the Dolphins, though, is definitely the running game where Mac was Hopper's start of the week. They've allowed 4.86 yards per attempt, 12 total touchdowns on the season. Mac is a low running back 1. Hines and Wilkins, on the other hand, are benched due to low volume. They're seeing 6 or less total touches since Mac's breakout game against the Bills.
Yeah, Mac is very decidedly the guy here, and he's looked pretty good doing it. This is a plus-plus matchup.
Hilton is a boom-bust high wide receiver, too. He sees Xavier Howard in shadow coverage most likely, but last week reminds us why he should generally be in your lineup. He's seen 7 and 9 targets in back-to-back in the last 2 weeks here. So I think his volume at the bare minimum gives you a safer floor. He's been heavily used in the red zone this year. Inman is a desperation wide receiver 4 type. He's your second receiving option over Grant and Rodgers, and he's most likely to see 5+ targets of those 3. At the tight end position, Doyle leads the team in targets. He has 14 over the last 3 games since he returned. He's a low tight end 1 position. I prefer him in PPR over standard format since he's not likely to score a touchdown for you. On the flip side, Ebron has turned into strictly a red zone play, 3 or less targets in all 3 games since Doyle returned. He's no longer a must-start for you, but his ceiling among tight ends is one of the highest in fantasy. So if you are looking at a situation where you want some risk in your lineup to try to get a boom-type play, I do like him against the Dolphins defense that's allowed 5 touchdowns in the last 5 games. As for the defense, top 10 play this week, much better than expected coming into the season. Tannehill is turnover and sack prone, and I like him very much in this particular matchup.
Agreed completely. Not a whole lot to say there. I love the Colts defense. I've documented that. So, you got anything else on that game?
Nope, that's it.
All right, you've got the next one too. Steelers Broncos. It's actually a Dan game, so Nick will be reading his notes. 3-point favorites are the Steelers on the road.
I'm surprised it's that low. I would easily take the Steelers in this matchup, even if with it being a road game. Auto starts, you're obviously starting Connor and Antonio Brown. We don't have to go into it very much. They're just plug and plays week in and week out. Big Ben and Juju are kind of the more fringe options. Road Ben is very hard to judge. He's been better this season. The discrepancy between Road Ben and Home Ben has not been as bad this year as it is in previous weeks. But Juju will see Chris Harris, most likely easily the best cornerback on the Broncos side. Juju's probably still a player you're starting. I like him as a high wide receiver 3, low wide receiver 2 type play this week. Vance McDonald's streamworthy. Broncos haven't given up a lot of touchdowns at head ends with just 5 total, but they're giving up 66 yards per game. So McDonald may see a lot of work between the 20s in this particular matchup. He's got 16 targets in the last 3 games, 2 straight games with a touchdown. Defense is also a decent play. Keenum hasn't thrown a pick and just 2 sacks over the last 2 games, but they don't score a lot of points. So it's a decent floor play if you roll the Steelers defense out this week.
Yeah, Keenum's been the definition of mediocre game manager.
Onto the Broncos side, Pittsburgh defense has gotten a lot better lately, so you're not starting Keenum. Lindsey was my start of the week, basically because it's a very, very chance that this game may get out of control early and limit his ability to get involved. I don't expect a lot of pass catching floor from these running backs. The Steelers are giving up the second fewest receptions and third fewest yards to running backs on the season. For Emmanuel Sanders, it is a revenge game, but Pittsburgh's been light out against wide receivers over the past 4 weeks, giving up just 10.35 points for the position in half PPR, 1 total receiving touchdown. So Sanders is a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 upside this week. It's going to be a tough play. Sutton is very touchdown dependent. Only 1 touchdown in the last 4 games for the Steelers makes him a bench on this particular week.
Yep.
Higher, it's just too much of a desperation play unless you're tight end premium or 2 tight end to reach for him in an average matchup.
I agree with that too. I don't want to stretch on anything that has to do with the Broncos this week, honestly.
All right, you're up next with Cardinals Chargers.
All right, Cardinals Chargers. Chargers favored by 12.5 in this one. A lot of big spreads this week. 44.5 point over under. Starting with the Cardinals, Rosen, as with most weeks, is a back-end streamer, but Joey Bosa is back for the Chargers. He was on a snap count last week. You expect that will go up this week. And they held Keenum and Carr both under 15 points over the last 2 weeks. So against a team that doesn't give up a ton to the quarterback in the Chargers, Josh Rosen's just a definite no for me. As for David Johnson, the Chargers are 4 straight weeks in trying to hold on. I lost my place. There we go. Chargers are 4 straight weeks in of giving up points to the top back. They're very good against receiving running backs, though, so floor is an option despite high usage. So basically, over 4 weeks, the Chargers really haven't given up a ton to top backs, I think is what I meant there. But David Johnson gets a ton of volume, so you've got upside, but probably a floor game for him. You're going to avoid the wide receivers if you can. Chargers have just allowed one wide receiver into double digits since week 7. And RSJ is a solid streamer this week. He's seen 20 targets over the last 4 weeks. And 3 of the last 7 tight ends have gone into double digits against the Chargers. It's not a great rate, but it's better than most matchups. You really don't see teams giving up double digits to the tight end in general. So 3 of the last 7 games makes RSJ just kind of a plus streamer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then moving on to the Chargers. Rivers is a model of consistency. 2 or more touchdowns in every game this year. But I expected back-end quarterback 1 and floor more this week for Rivers. I don't think Arizona's offense is going to keep up to where he has to throw. And Mahomes is the only quarterback over 20 points against Arizona in the last 4 weeks. And only 4 quarterbacks have had 2 or more touchdowns against the Cardinals all season. So while Rivers hasn't had a game where he's thrown 2 or less, the Cardinals don't really give up a ton of touchdowns either, and they don't have to. So back to that Winston Rivers question. I think the floors are the same, but Rivers doesn't have any upside this week to me. As for the running game, Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. Most of this is going to be on Eckler because obviously if Gordon plays, you start him, but even though cautiously. Eckler's a fine running back too if Gordon can't go, though, and maybe okay even if he does. Cardinals' run defense is going to have double-digit points to at least one back in 7 or 10 weeks this year. And Gordon, meanwhile, Gordon's a stud start, but even if he does play, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I think that they try to protect him, especially if they get a lead, and you're going to see a decent dose of Austin Eckler regardless. So Eckler is a fine flex start this week, even if Gordon goes, and he's a solid running back too if he doesn't. As for the wide receivers, slot guys are the name of the game against the Cardinals. Is all the top scoring wide receivers against them have been slot guys, at least partially. Keenan Allen's a must start. All others I'm avoiding because of the game script and generally how solid this team has been. They've 0 games of 2 wide receivers going into double digits, and the only people that have are slot guys. So you're going to kind of stick back away from Mike Williams, and Tyrell Williams is questionable to even play. So I'm just going to avoid all of that. And as always, you're going to avoid the tight ends. Defense, on the other hand, though, is very, very startable in this one against a quarterback that's prone to throw interceptions and with that pass rush intact. That's all I got on this game. Anything you'd like to add?
Nope. Let's wrap. Let's get to the Sunday night game.
All right, Sunday night game. Packers at the Vikings. I am Team Meteor in this one. Vikings favored by 3.5, 47.5 over under. Nick, you got this one.
I'm going to run through this fast because I'm going to bounce as soon as this is done because I got dinner reservations to make. On the Packers side, no quarterback has thrown for 300-plus yards or multiple touchdowns against the Vikings since Week 5, and Rodgers has actually only been slightly above average this season as a fantasy quarterback. So he is not a must-start on the road here. He's a back-end QB1. I'd actually have him below Brady. You may be able to find a better streaming option this week than Rodgers, so don't consider him an auto-start. Evaluate your options carefully. You might be able to find a better play. For the running game, similar kind of scenario where the Vikings are allowing just 3.63 yards a carry, 5 total touchdowns to the running back position on the season. Aaron Jones is a low volume-based running back too this week. Once again, you may be able to avoid playing him with better options. Marlon Mack, Nick Chubb, other guys we've talked about so far in the preview. This is one of only 2 bad matchups left for him, though. Outside of Bears Week 15, you're going to be starting him the rest of the way. For the wide receivers, Adams is the only one you're considering starting. He's a locked-in wide receiver 1. He scored the last time these 2 teams played. I am not starting MVS, ESB, or any of the other wide receivers for the Packers this week, though. It's a very, very tough matchup. They've only allowed 1 wide receiver touchdown in the last 6 games. Jimmy Graham is a top 12 tight end if he plays. He went for 95 yards last time these 2 played. If he is out, though, I'm not chasing any of the backups as a fill-in play. Jimmy Graham is the only one I'm considering, and it is more of a mid to low tight end 1 than a top 4 or 5 type play. Anything to add on the Packers?
Nope.
On the Vikings side, Cousins had his best performance of the year against the Packers with 425 yards and 4 touchdowns in the first matchup. I don't think he matches that performance again, but Diggs and Thielen can abuse these quarters. He'll be a mid-quarterback 1 in this particular matchup. Cook on the flip side is a mid to low RB2 similar to Aaron Jones. Vikings have really struggled getting any semblance of running game going. He got 90 total yards the last time these 2 teams played. It was his 3rd most total yardage on the year, period, and he has not scored a single touchdown this season. Murray on the same vein is on the bench too because the only way he gets you a decent day is if he scores and you're hoping for a goal line plunge if that happens. For the wide receivers, Diggs and Thielen are both wide receiver ones. Both put up at least 125 yards and at least one touchdown the last time these two teams played. Right now, though, I'd actually prefer Diggs. He's been the better player over the last 4 games, averaging over 100 yards and a touchdown in the games he has played. Rudolph has not scored since week 3, hasn't broken 50 yards since week 4. He's not even worth starting, and he's very droppable if you're trying to stream defenses. I'd rather pick up Brate for the rest of the season. Defense is not a top 12 play, but with some of the matchups this week, you may get stuck with some teams hoarding defenses. If you have to play them, it's not terrible. Rodgers has gotten sacked quite a bit this season, has given up a lot of turnovers, and the team has given up more fumbles than usual and is not scoring as many points as they have in years past. Packers are not a absolute hell no type play like they were in previous seasons.
Yep.
That's all I got on that. Sorry to leave you alone, Hopper, for the Monday night game, but I think you can wrap this up on your own.
2 questions real quick, and I'm not sure how long they've been there. If Green plays, do I play him ahead of Edelman, or do I just not worry about it and insert Edelman now?
If Green goes and we don't get any rumor that it's he's not a decoy, I would start Green.
Yeah, I would too. That was from Jorge, and then Project Badass wants to know Connor or Fournette. My hunch says try to get them both in there, but if you can't for some reason.
I mean, they're both top 7 or 8 plays for me, so that's a tough situation where I'm not starting both. But if I have to pick one, I'm taking Connor.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. He's been more consistent, a little bit better matchup. All right. Have fun.
Matt, Nick Sparks, I'm out of here.
Yep. All right. Titans, Texans. There is no over-under in this because I believe of the Mariota thing. Mariota is expected to play, though. I want to stay clear of him. Houston's allowed 1 startable quarterback day since week 5. Mariota has been exceptionally streaky, so I just don't want anything to do with that. As for the running backs, Dion Lewis and Derrick Henry, as with most weeks, Lewis is the guy you want to go with in any form of PPR league. He's a mid-range flex option. However, Houston's not allowed a 100-yard back all season. They've allowed just 5 rush touchdowns and not a ton of receiving work either, just 17 receptions over the last 5 weeks. So it's not great for Lewis, and Derrick Henry is a decided sit for me this week. Corey Davis is the only wide receiver you consider. That's because of his volume. He was what I would call a sneaky start, if you will. Devontae Parker, T.Y. Hilton, and Odell Beckham are the only 300-plus yards wide receivers. They were peppered with targets, 10-plus for each guy. I would expect that Corey Davis probably sees nearly that same volume. As for the Texans, Deshaun Watson, you're going to go ahead and start. The rushing yards won't be there, but Tennessee's just average against the pass. He's averaged 297 yards, 3 touchdowns against the Titans in 2 games against them last year, and really just 1 bad game over the last 4 or 5 for Watson. Lamar Miller is normally reliable, but he's my sit of the week. Your hope would be for a touchdown, so he's a back-end streamer against a defense that hasn't allowed anyone over 61 yards in 5 weeks. They're under 300 pass yards allowed to running backs on the season as well. So Lamar Miller is a situation I am trying to avoid. And then at wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins is a must-start against a mediocre pass defense. Only twice all season has a team's top wide receiver not hit double digits against the Titans. Kiki Kuti, another sneaky start as he's seeing volume, even though the Titans haven't necessarily been weak against secondary wide receivers. I think he's a fine flex in PPR leagues. And then the Texans defense, you're probably okay starting them as well. That's all we got for Week 12. As always, tweet us your questions. I am at HotBFF. You can tweet the show at BeaverfieldFF. Not with me right now are Nick Sparts. He is at Nick Sparts on Twitter. As you can see, just my name in the YouTube video. Let me get that off of there. And at 3BFF, who had to work because of Black Friday and being in retail tonight. You can follow the show as well on Instagram to catch photos of can art most weeks. Instagram, Untapped, at Beerfield FF for those. And as always, tune in on Sunday morning where we will have the rest of our start sits as well as, the rest of our, we'll be there to answer your questions. I forgot how words worked. So tune in on Sunday. We'll be there at 10:30 in the morning to answer your questions. It'll be Dan and I for sure. Nick, wherever he is, maybe, possibly, is what it sounded like. So come to us with your start sits. We'll have your latest injury updates, any weather that we need to report to get you ready for Week 12. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you next time on Beerfield Fantasy Football. See ya.